God and his teaching. All right. So that's another way to look at that particular quote of Jesus. So in this sense, he says that the word son is related to the lofty position of these clerics. They're the ones mankind has been turning to. And I've skipped a paragraph and moved on to the next paragraph. So let's see. Shireen, could you read the next paragraph, please? I mean, not the one that is evident and manifest, but to skip down that the term son, so we can keep going on with this one term. Yeah.
That the term son hath been applied to the leaders of religion is due to their lofty position, their fame and renown. Such are the universally recognized divines of every age who speak with authority, and whose fame is securely established. If they be in the likeness of the Son of Truth, they will surely be accounted as the most exalted of all luminaries. Otherwise, they are to be recognized as the focal centers of hellish fire. Even as he saith, verily the sun and the moon are both condemned to the torment of infernal fire. You are no doubt familiar with the interpretation of the terms sun and moon mentioned in this verse. No need, therefore, to refer unto it. And whosoever is of the element of this sun and moon, that is, followeth the example of these leaders in setting his face towards falsehood, and in turning away from the truth, he undoubtedly cometh out of infernal gloom and returneth thereunto.
All right. He doesn't mince words there at the end. What do you think? Any thoughts on this paragraph?
It's like you're saying, he's basically saying that people who don't get it are just damning themselves to eternal damnation. I don't know. Infernal gloom. It's pretty bad.
So what do you think about that?
It sucks to not know things. It sucks to
ignorance is not bliss in this case. I think that's what's being said.
Well, okay, so what about the people who don't even try to understand, who basically ignore all of it? He doesn't talk about them. Although, interestingly, Abdu'l-Baha said they're the worst. He condemns spiritual apathy even more so than, people who, because these are people who are following the folks they consider to be authoritative. So, a good Catholic who follows the Pope and says, oh, well, I can't believe in Baha'u'llah because the Pope has told me not to. Baha'u'llah says you're in as much trouble as the Pope for following him. So this is pretty weighty stuff. We don't like to dwell on it.
I wonder if, because you know how some Christians or some people say, oh, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell type of thinking.
Right.
Like, how much of this is that correlation? I don't know. Not that we think people are, because we don't believe in that heaven and hell in that way. You know what I mean? But in some ways, I'm just trying to think of how that was not misinterpreted, or how that thing came to be in Christianity, so pervasively thought of.
Right.
And I don't know if similarly these were things that were said and then they took those things and turned it into oh, you're going to hell or you're going to face infernal gloom.
Right.
But that's the vibes I get.
Well, when he doesn't talk about the torment of infernal fire, he undoubtedly cometh out of infernal gloom and returneth thereunto. So infernal gloom is a spiritual state. It's not a state of physical being, obviously. But you know what? To not to be desirous of being close to God and thinking that you are close to God because you are following a religious leader, but not gaining spiritually because you're following someone who doesn't understand. You're being deprived of all of the benefits of being in line with the will of God, with the whole flow of the universe. So he refers to that as being infernal gloom. Look at how many unhappy people we have in the world, right?
Yeah. I also think of it, I was just thinking, because you know how in some answered questions, Abdul-Baha talks about like, how do you know good if you don't know bad? Like you don't know that concept where it's like, you don't know what XYZ is if you don't know the opposite of it, right? You don't know happiness if you don't know pain. You don't know and why there is this like the duality of these things.
Right.
And I wonder if like I was just thinking of the weather in Los Angeles right now, where it's like, well, if we're always used to like the gloomy weather, right? Because I'm just thinking gloom and like think of like, okay, if I'm always in this environment of like gloomy weather, and you never know what it means to like be in the sunshine. And the benefits of like, oh, what a nice day it is, like, oh, how beautiful it is, like how I can hear things, you know what I mean? Like kind of that standpoint of like, I don't know if that metaphor works, but or if you guys are following what I'm saying, but like kind of trying to grasp it in that way, of like maybe that's what that's referring to, or that's what kind of prompts in my brain.
I think that's a good way to think about it. I think I may actually now have the internet, so let me see if I can come on so we can share screen. But in the meantime, okay, Mateen, can you read the "And now, O Seeker"?
And now, O Seeker, it behooveth us firmly to cling onto the. I feel like cheating is the best person to say this. That perchance we may leave behind the darksome night of error and embrace the dawning light of divine guidance. Shall we not flee from the face of denial and seek the sheltering shadow of certitude? Shall we not free ourselves from the horror of satanic gloom and hasten towards the rising light of the heavenly beauty? In such wise we bestow upon you the fruit of the tree of divine knowledge, that ye may gladly and joyously abide in the Redzwan of divine wisdom.
In progress.
Okay. I now. Let's see. Why am I not?
You have to disconnect one of them. Yeah,
Okay,
it's like from the one from your phone you can
yeah,
turn
let
off.
me do that. Okay, let me, okay. Now, I think here we are, and I'm glad to see Mary Ann. I didn't see you earlier. Okay, so let me now share screen, and I'll bring up the abridged version, if you don't mind. Thank you, Shireen, for pulling this up this way. Okay, so. Okay, are you guys seeing this?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So we have that same term, the firm chord, right? That we talked about last week. The darksome night of error, dawning light of divine guidance, sheltering shadow of certitude, tree of divine knowledge. All of these are allusions to terminology, to symbols that we use over and over and over in the Baha'i writings. Now he's got another term use for this. So Miriam, can you read the next couple of slides, please?
Sure. In another sense, by the terms sun, moon, and stars are meant such laws and teachings as have been established and proclaimed in every dispensation, such as the laws of prayer and fasting.
You didn't see that coming, did you?
In all dispensations, the law of prayer hath constituted a fundamental element of the revelation of all the prophets of God, a law the form and the manner of which have been adapted to the varying requirements of every age, inasmuch as every subsequent revelation hath abolished the manners, habits, and teachings that have been clearly, specifically, and firmly established by the former dispensation. These have accordingly been symbolically expressed in terms of sun and moon. In the traditions, the terms sun and moon have been applied to prayer and fasting, even as it is said, fasting is illumination, prayer is light.
And he gives us a story. Can you keep on going here, Miriam?
Sure. One day, a well-known divine came to visit us. While we were conversing with him, he referred to the above-quoted tradition. He said, "Inasmuch as fasting causeth the heat of the body to increase, it hath therefore been likened unto the light of the sun. And as the prayer of the night season refresheth man, it hath been compared unto the radiance of the moon." Thereupon we realized that the poor man had not been favored with a single drop of the ocean of true understanding, and had strayed far from the burning bush of divine wisdom. We then politely observed to him, saying, "The interpretation your honor hath given to this tradition is the one current amongst the people. Could it not be interpreted differently?" He asked us, "What could it be?" And we made reply, "Muhammad, the seal of the prophets, and the most distinguished of God's chosen ones, hath likened the dispensation of the Quran unto heaven, by reason of its loftiness, its paramount influence, its majesty, and the fact that it comprehendeth all religions. And as the sun and moon constitute the brightest and most prominent luminaries in the heavens, similarly in the heaven of the religion of God, two shining orbs have been ordained, fasting and prayer. Islam is heaven, fasting is its sun, prayer its moon."
Let's see. Can you keep going?
Yeah.
One more.
"Hence it is clear and manifest that by the words, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, is intended the waywardness of the divines, and the annulment of laws firmly established by divine revelation, all of which, in symbolic language, have been foreshadowed by the manifestation of God. None except the righteous shall partake of this cup. None but the godly can share therein."
So thank you. Now we have a whole nother set of definitions for sun, moon, and stars. And we also know that Baha'u'llah has a sense of humor. Did you catch that? I just loved his comment. We realized that the poor man had not been favored with a single drop of the ocean of true understanding. And so what did he do? We then politely observed to him, saying, "The interpretation your honor hath given to this tradition is the one current amongst the people. Could it not be interpreted differently?" And he goes, "Oh, what could it be?" I just love the way he tells his story, right? So, fasting is illumination and prayer is light. And the dispensations are heaven.
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe it's because we're in the last hour of the fast for today. What do you think the difference is between illumination and light?
Well, I think you can say illumination is an outward way of making something appear, right? You know, the light itself illumines something,
Mm-hmm.
but the light itself can illumine or not illumine. I know that's just, I think many of us would use them sort of synonymously,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just off the top of my head what I think. What do the rest of you think?
I'm just trying to think of like what is the difference, like in terms of, because it's clearly distinguished, like fasting is this, prayer is this, right?
Right.
But then I'm trying to understand what does that like actually like what is the difference? Because yeah, illumination and light in my head are very synonymous.
Well, it's very interesting that he also says in here that all of the dispensations, let's see, let me go back to here. In all dispensations, the law of prayer hath constituted a fundamental element of the revelation of all the prophets of God. A law, the form and the manner of which hath been adapted to the varying requirements of every age. So he doesn't say the same thing about fasting. You know, fasting shows up in many religions, but all religions talk about prayer, have some sort of prayer, but they don't all have fasting, which is very interesting to me. But also that prayer can be adapted. So you have this very basic law of prayer, but it's adaptable to the varying requirements of each age. You know, if we as a society in the modern world had to stop 5 times a day for obligatory prayer, as they do in the Islamic world, that would be more than a little disruptive, don't you think? So I think that obviously these are two very, very, not only essential, but very deep practices that we don't fully appreciate.
This may not really help, but it says online. It says I also wanted to know. It says illuminance is the transmission of natural light from like windows, and then lighting or light is the distribution of artificial light, like from a lamp.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. Well, there's a bodily process going on with fasting that you don't have anything physical necessarily happening with prayer, which is another interesting distinction. So maybe that's a very good question, Shireen. We don't know the answer, but
I think I was just thinking about it because I was also looking up the definition of illuminate, and like in my head, or just trying to think of if I had to define illuminate, what would it be? And I would think like, oh, to shed light, right? To shine a light or something like that. So it's like a mechanism of some kind in my head, or like in the sense of like the light and I think you kind of talked about where like the light in of itself is the prayer. And I think fasting, where it's like fasting is a mechanism for us to like pray more or be more reflective. So I don't know if that's like about it or if we're just like splitting hairs. I don't know.
Well, clearly these are two very important things. And so thinking about them and why they're important is very important. Okay.
So far there's been 3 different interpretations of sun and moon.
Moon and the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to remind us what those 3 are so far?
The first one was the manifestation of God, and then the second was the referring to clergy,
Mm-hmm.
and this one right now, the teachings, laws, or I guess no, prayer and fasting.
Right, the laws and commandments. Yeah,
Right.
good. Thank you. So Imam, can I also get you to now read for the next few slides, please?
Yes. It is unquestionable that in every succeeding revelation, the sun and moon of the teachings, laws, commandments, and prohibitions which have been established in the preceding dispensation and which have overshadowed the people of that age become darkened, that is, are exhausted and cease to exert their influence. Had the people of the gospel, Christians, recognized the meaning of the symbolic terms sun and moon, had they sought, unlike the forward and perverse, enlightenment from him who is a revealer of divine knowledge, they would have surely comprehended the purpose of these terms, but would not have become afflicted and oppressed by the darkness of their selfish desires. That is the meaning of the sacred verse, but nay, I swear by the Lord of the East and the West, inasmuch as the sun referred to have each their own particular rising and setting place. And as the commentators of the Quran have failed to grasp the symbolic meaning of these suns, they therefore were at pains to interpret the above quoted verse. Some of them maintain that owing to the fact that the sun each day rises from a different point, the terms east and west have been mentioned in the plural. Others have written that by this verse, the 4 seasons of the year are intended, inasmuch as the dawning and setting points of the sun vary with the change of the seasons. Such is the depth of their understanding. Nonetheless, they persist in imputing their error and folly to those gems of knowledge, those irreproachable and pure symbols of wisdom.
So he's giving a wonderful example of one of the Quranic verses regarding the coming of manifestations and the suns, and how they have been, how this one particular verse has been so misinterpreted, just like Seal of the Prophets. So when you're engaging with someone who is from a Muslim background, they may have this understanding of this particular verse that Baha'u'llah says shows that they don't have a clue what it means. Adib, can you get the next few, please?
Sure. Strive thou to comprehend from these lucid, these powerful, conclusive, and unevokeable statements the meaning of the cleaving of the heaven, one of the signs that must needs herald the coming of the last hour, the day of resurrection. As he had said, when the heaven shall be cloven asunder, by heaven is meant the heaven of divine revelation, which is elevated with every manifestation, and rent asunder with every subsequent one. By cloven asunder is meant that the former dispensation is superseded and annulled. That a divine revelation, which for years had been securely established, beneath whose shadow all who have embraced it have been reared and nurtured, by the light of whose law generations of men have been disciplined, the excellency of whose word men have heard recounted by their fathers, in such wise that human eye had beheld not but the pervading influence of its grace, and mortal ear had heard not but the resounding majesty of its command. What act is mightier than that such a revelation should, by the power of God, be cloven asunder, and be abolished at the appearance of one soul? Reflect, is this a mightier act than that which abject and foolish men have imagined, the cleaving of the heaven to mean?
That's a pretty weighty paragraph. Any thoughts or comments? So of course, if you've been raised a good Muslim and this one individual comes along and says, Islam is finished, and I'm now giving you a new revelation with new laws and teachings. Everything you've known, the whole way your society has functioned under Islam, it's finished. Now we're moving on to the next stage. It's not a surprise that people wouldn't like that the heaven would have been cleaved asunder, breaking it up. Shireen, were you going to say something?
I was going to ask what cloven asunder is supposed to mean, and then you just said it.
To break it up, to cleave it, to a meat cleaver, those big nasty that you break a big piece of meat, that's cleaving. Cloven asunder, that's from that word. Asunder.
I've always wondered what that means. I feel like it's in a lot of places. I've heard that word before, obviously, our phrase before. So.
Right. Yeah, asunder means to break it into pieces. So think of a big butcher taking a big butcher knife and breaking something up into parts. That's cloven asunder. So clearly, this is, of course, people are going to be upset. This is to the uncle of the Bab who doesn't understand why his wonderful nephew was executed, why his brother was executed for believing in his nephew. Why are people going against this wonderful man who had very enlightened teachings? Because he's breaking up the world that everyone has lived in for over 1,000 years. They're upset. Is this a mightier act than that which these abject and foolish men have imagined the cleaving of the heaven to mean? So it's much more a great act for the Bab to come and cleave asunder the Islam than anything we can imagine. And so what happens when they do this? Yes, Adib, go ahead.
Yeah, in that, so it's like what the Bab did was clothing asunder, because what was that how it was seen? Was it like he was really like saying like we need to be done with Islam and move forward? Because I was under the impression that the Bab came saying like shake out of your superstition and know that like a new prophet is coming. Is that kind of in the same way of saying like what you guys have been doing, Islam has its time has kind of run out? Is that what I'm understanding? Is that really what
this is what the conference of Badasht, why it ended in total confusion, because for the first time it finally hit them what the Bab was saying.
Okay.
And this is Taharai taking the veil off.
Right.
Saying, this is it. We're done. And Baha'u'llah reinforcing that. And all the Babis leaving and these are the leaders of the Bab who were there at the conference of Badasht, his main lieutenants. And this was all done deliberately.
Thank you.
I think, are you guys still there? Okay, I think she left.
I think she froze.
Yeah, Kathy's internet is probably down. Oh. So we know everybody else's name here. We don't know iPhone's name.
Who is this person?
It's probably Arya over here, Arya Tejerati. Just kidding. showing up. Just
Unmute
covering
yourself.
himself.
Tell us who you are, man.
Didn't Kathy say she was gonna log in on her phone? That's probably her phone.
That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, but she was on her phone before and then she like got off her phone.
Matthew, I'll put you and iPhone in the breakout room and you can talk to figure out who it is.
I feel like if it was Suru, she'd say something. And now it's just someone who thinks it's funny.
Ah, good.
I think Kathy froze again.
Or she's just trying to stay incredibly still. All right, well, since she's not there, Mariam, why don't you continue for us? Explain.
What am I explaining?
Who's this iPhone
Fine.
person?
I don't know. It's a spy.
That's probably the most accurate description.
I don't know who this person is, but I mean, we can always continue reading. I don't know. What do you guys
No,
want to do?
let's play. We can wait. We can wait.
Yeah, okay. I also low-key got so screwed up by daylight savings time today that I'm so used to coming home from work and eating at 6 that I pulled out my dinner, and Shane, it wasn't until you said it's the last hour of the fast, I was like, oh shit. So I screwed up.
Yeah,
I saw you. I saw that you had like a bowl, right?
Yeah, dude.
That's how it's working? Like, shit.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, wait, in Fresno, is the times different over there?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what's
yeah.
going on?
No. No, it's because I'm used to Arizona. They don't do daylight savings. So I'm like, what is this springing forward business? I got one less hour of sleep. I'm more tired, and I'm like, it's 6, time to eat.
I know, this is one of the worst policy changes. It happened under George Bush.
Well, it's ending this November, isn't it?
Allegedly, but
Theoretically.
I mean, I appreciate not having to like wake up at like 5:30 to like eat before the sun,
It's true.
rises, but the extra hour just really, even though it's technically
It's
the
yeah.
same amount of time, psychologically, it doesn't feel.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
Kathy texted me and said that she lost internet again. It says that this is probably a good stopping point. She just said because it's close to the breakup fast anyways, and then we'll just continue next week. So
Okay.
she just said we'll continue discussions next week. Yeah, cool. So I guess we'll never know iPhone's identity, but
No,
we'll see you
never.
guys.
So
We'll see you guys.
who's recording it?
I'm recording.
Oh,
I guess I need to stop recording.